Hello, my name is Ari Arson, and today on this very special Valentine's Day, I am joined by my friend John the Skeleton. Say, John, it's been a bit since our last reading video. What have you been up to?
Getting skella-bitches.
Ah, so, why are you alone on Valentine's Day?
Why are you?
Okay, you got me there. Anyway, John, we have a special book in store for our lovely audience today. Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. So, let's get into it. True, nervous, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed them, not dulled them. Above all, the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I not mad? Hearken and observe how healthily and how calmly I tell you about the whole story. It is impossible to say the idea entered my brain, but once conceived it haunted me night and day. Object there was none, passion there was none. I had loved the old man. He had never wronged me, he had never given me insult, for his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye, yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the old man's life, and thus rid myself of this evil eye forever. Now, this is the point you may fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man during the whole week before I killed him. And every night about midnight I turned the latch on his door and opened it oh so gently. And then when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light would shine out, and then in I thrust my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it in slowly, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me about an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him. As he lay upon his bed, would a madman have been so wise as this? And then when my head was all well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously, and for the hinges creaked. I undid them so much that a single thin ray of light fell upon the vulture eye, and this I did for 7 long nights, every night at midnight. But I found that the eye was always closed, and when so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man who had vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see he would have been a very profound old man indeed, to suspect that every night at just 12 I looked upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night I was more than unusually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before than that night had I felt the extent of my own powers. Of my sagacity I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there was, opening a door little by little, and he had not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved his bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as pitch black as the thick darkness, for the shutters were close fastened through the fear of robbers, and so I knew that he could not see an opening from the door. I kept pushing on steadily. I had my head in and I was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped on the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up from the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quiet, still, and said nothing. For the whole hour I did not move a muscle. In the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was sitting on the bed, listening, just as I might have done night after night, hearkening to death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew that groan was of mortal terror. Not a groan of pain or grief, oh no. It was the low, stiff sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew this sound well. Many a night just at midnight when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening its dreadful echo. The terrors that distracted me. I say, I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him. Although I chuckled at heart, I knew he had been lying awake ever since the first sight of noise. When he turned in his bed, his fears had been growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but he could not. He had been saying to himself, it was nothing but the wind in the chimney. It was only a mouse crossing the floor. It was merely a cricket which had made a single chirp. Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these superstitions, but he had found all in vain, because death and approaching had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. While I waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. Cannot imagine how stealthily, until the end of the single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice and fell upon the vulture's eye. It was open, wide open. I grew furious as I gazed upon it, and I saw my perfect distinctness. All a dull blue with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else but the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And now have I told you not what you mistake for madness, but his acuteness of the senses. Now I say, there came a low, dull, quick sound such as a watch makes when it's enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates a soldier to charge. But even now I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried to maintain this ray upon his eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder and louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now at the dead hour of the night aimed the dreadful silence of the old house. So strange, a noise that excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet, for some moments longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder and louder. I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by the neighbor. An old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. Then I smiled gaily to find that the deed had been done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there for many minutes. There was no pulsion. He was stone dead. His eye would cause me trouble no more. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for concealment of the body. The night waned. I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head, the arms, the legs. Then I took 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited them all between the scantlings. Then I replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, would have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had cut it all. When I had made the end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded at the hour, I heard a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect civility as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by the neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged with the police. And they, the officers, had been permitted to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I had mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them to search, and search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasure, secure and undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room, and desired them to rest for their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot which beneath resided the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat while I answered cheerily. They chatted of familiar things, but ere long I felt myself getting pale, and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and chatted. The ringing became more distinct. I talked more freely to get the feeling, but it continued and I gained definitiveness, until at length I found the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I grew very pale, but I talked more fluently, with a heightened voice, yet sound increased. What could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such as a sound a watch would make when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath. The officers heard it not. I talked more vehemently about the noise that steadily increased. I rose and argued about trifles in a high key with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited by fury by the observations of these men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore, I swung the chair at which I had been sitting, I grated upon the boards. The noise arose me and continuously increased. It grew louder and louder, and the men still chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror, this I thought. I think, but anything better than this agony, anything was more tolerable than this decision. I could bear their hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die, and now again hark, louder, louder, louder. Villains! I shrieked. Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here! It is the beating of his hideous heart. Well, that was fun. If I had a roommate with evil eyes, I can't say I would react any differently. Did you enjoy it, John?
Needs more skelehos.
John, you said the same thing about Blood Meridian.
Still true.
Well, I can't argue there. Anyway, I hope you all had a lovely time today. And please have a great Valentine's Day. Goodbye.